Welcome to the On the Blue Line podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Mulder, and I'm excited to be back with you again this week. Thank you for listening. I hope you had a great weekend. I know I did, and I'm so thankful to be sitting back in here with you yet again. If you are new to the show, this is the monologue show. It's called Morning Roll Call. It's just you and I, roughly 30 minutes typically. I go over a few news stories, and I give you something actionable for the week ahead. Be sure, if this is your thing, not your thing, be sure to check out the other show. It's called The Interview Room, completely different format. And in there, I sit down with someone new every week. This last week, if you haven't listened to it yet, I sat down with Darren Hill, a friend of mine who happens to be running for sheriff out in Douglas County, Colorado. Be sure to check that one out. And coming this Thursday is Dylan Ruse, and he's doing some great things in the masculinity space, and I think you're going to really enjoy that one as well. So if you haven't listened to the most recent episodes of The Interview Room, I encourage you to go back and do that now. Also, I intend to be coming out with a live show. It won't be replacing Morning Roll Call at this point, but anyone who's listened for any length of time or knows me personally knows that the dream, the vision, the plan, if this thing ever comes to fruition, is to move towards a daily live show. That's what I'd like to do. I would like to, well, I'm not going to go deep into it right here, but with a few tweaks, some things I think you would find interesting, that's the long-term plan. In the meantime, I hope to come out with starting to come live at least one night a week to start. It will probably be a Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So let me know. Give us a little feedback. You can always email at feedback at ontheblueline.com. You can also send a DM. We're still small enough. I answer most of them myself. So definitely drop me a note. Let me know what you're thinking. But I believe if it didn't release this last Friday, it will release by next Friday. We're going to start doing a live show, and probably on YouTube and Facebook to start, and then we'll expand out from there. So if you have any thoughts on it, I'd love to hear it. And thank you so much for listening. One last shout out right before I get going is I have a good friend. We're just going to call him Dan for the purpose of this, but Dan found out that we had a need, some things we needed in order to keep doing this podcast, and he took it upon himself to solve that need. So I'm not going to go any deeper than that, but I just want to say thank you to him and a shout out to him, because it is you, the listeners, and people who have done some really fantastic things to make this a possibility. None of this is possible without you, so thank you very much. So, this week on the Morning Roll Call, a hero cop saves man wanting to leap to end it all. Why would we keep really bad guys in jail when they can be terrorizing your local community? Being friends with a cop killer apparently makes you qualified for a job prospect? And if your leg offends thee, well, I don't suggest cutting it off, but to each their own. Morning Roll Call starts now. All right, so let's get into some news this week. So we're going to start with a feel-good story. And as with all good feel-good stories, right, in the law enforcement world, we can always also mention something that could have went really bad. But officer connects with a man, coaxes him from the edge of the overpass. Check out this video. You'll see there's a lot of traffic going by, which she actually said was a benefit. So this is coming to us from the Vidor Police Department. And a shout out to Officer Brittany Haley, who is being hailed as a hero for her actions during this incident. She arrives on this call at a local interstate to find a 20-year-old man. He is leaning over the concrete barrier of the overpass, and it appears, to all that we're seeing the scene, that he intended to harm himself. She actually mentions in the interview that she could hear the traffic noise, so she used that as a ruse, if you would, though I'm sure the traffic noise was probably an issue in communicating effectively. But she used that as a way to get up closer and closer to him so that she could get nice and close, talk to him, and then was able to get him safely to a hospital. So she says, I can tell by what he was saying, by him not jumping and continuing to talk to me, that he wanted to live. And then, of course, they got him to some mental health resources. So that is awesome. Sadly, these stories don't always end this way. They don't always end good, even when law enforcement does everything right and tries to save somebody's life. So I always think about that, especially when I read these type stories, because even though these are awesome, and I like to bring you the good news stories, just keep in mind the toll that these type of calls can have on officers, especially when they don't end well. So just something to think about this week. All right. The next news story that I want to bring you is out of New York City. And it wouldn't be a great New York City story if it didn't involve a madman with an axe. But it's New York City, so it's even better, right? So an accused jilted madman who flew into an axe-wielding rage at a Lower East Side McDonald's was released without bail as his arraignment because neither charge that he was charged with is eligible for bail under the state's lenient criminal justice reforms. Well, isn't that interesting? So watch what this guy does. Watch this video. So he grabs an axe. I love how this article uses the word allegedly all through it, which I agree. We do the same thing in law enforcement. Well, allegedly, we can't, they haven't been trial yet. We can't prove them. As long as they're pretty sure that the guy in this video is Michael, however you pronounce his last name, Palacios, then I think we could probably remove allegedly because he grabs an axe and he loses his mind inside the McDonald's, as you are seeing. Smashes the window. There is a point in here where essentially he tries to connect with a female. She rejects him. He ends up in an incident with these three men. I don't really understand what's going on here, why they're just sitting here throwing punches at him and he's just standing there calmly. That's super odd to me, but it's New York. What can I say? And then he just loses his mind. He reaches into his backpack, pulled out an axe, and began smashing tables and the wall of the restaurant while the patrons scattered in fear. He had a previous charge of resisting arrest from a previous incident, and he was arraigned on fourth-degree criminal mischief and possession of weapons charges. And just another day in New York, I think, especially another current day in New York, the way things are these days. So the third and final story for the three things you ought to know this week is infuriating. Police officer's widow blasts Fetterman for appointing cop killer friend to pardon board. So if you're following what's going on in Pennsylvania with the Senate race that involves John Fetterwoman, I'm not being mean. His words, not mine. If you haven't watched his one campaign where he's standing there with the Women's Day, he actually, instead of calling himself Fetterman, he calls himself Fetterwoman. So anyway, but Fetterman, this article's interesting, and it has a couple different perspectives, but the widow of a Philadelphia police officer killed by ex-Black Panther Mumia, I may be completely wrong on how to pronounce this name, but Mumia Abu Jamal says it's infuriating that Senate hopeful John Fetterman picked a self-described buddy of the cop killer to serve on Pennsylvania's Board of Pardons. So essentially, Maureen Faulkner is the widow of a police officer who was killed by this Abu Jamal, and the Celeste trustee was selected to serve as Secretary of Board of Pardons. However, trustee had in 2018 wrote about Abu Jamal that I love Mumia and has self-proclaimed that he is a friend of this individual. So Fetterman, who currently is the lieutenant governor, is the one that put this quote-unquote friend in this new position. And obviously this brought up not only this widow, who is completely upset and infuriated over it, but also that there's been a lot of criticism for Fetterman when it comes to how he is going with crime-related issues, like we're seeing across the nation, which is why I thought this was a story to bring up. Several groups of sheriffs came out that Fetterman had calls to release up to 1/3 of Pennsylvania's inmates from jail. He wanted to end mandatory life sentences for some murders. He's come under fire for his work on the Board of Pardons, which he's pled to transform in order to advance progressive criminal justice reform. There's not a lot of specific information here, but I have a feeling it's not something we would agree on. But I wish him the best with that. Now, in fairness, I would not bring you a story unless I gave you both sides of it. So Fetterman's campaign did come out and said they strongly disagree with Secretary Trustee on this issue and a host of other issues. In no way does he speak for John, that's John Fetterman, in any way, shape, or form. And he totally disavows this vile remark. Cavallo, that's the communications director for Fetterman, said that he does not believe that Mumia Abu Jamal deserves a second chance, nor should any cop killer get a second chance. We can agree on that 100%. We can 100% agree on that. But as you continue to read, the whole campaign hasn't exactly always held these points of views. He's also campaigned with anti-police activists, and he supports movements to defund the police. So, not 100% sure what exactly he believes versus what he is saying when you're in a close race for Senate and you are hoping to win. So, that is all I had for the 3 news stories. See, those were short and easy this week. So now I have to bring you the crazy story, right? In this crazy story, usually I try to bring you crazy funny. This one is crazy sad, but it is so crazy I felt, well, we had to at least go over it, right? So, I don't know. I think what this is an overarching mental health issue, but you tell me your opinion. But what's really bizarre to me is how the wife reacted and what the wife did in this incident. So I'm going to tell you this story, and then I'm going to let you tell me what you think, or let you draw your own conclusions about maybe something she could have done a little bit better, right? So there's this man who lives in Arkansas. Of course it's Arkansas. And on August 2nd, a corporal with the Boone County Sheriff's Office, he finds a naked man on the ground in front of a residence. That could be Arkansas, that could be Georgia, that could certainly be Florida. So that in and of itself isn't anything strange. However, it goes on that he was missing a portion of his leg. Now, I don't know if this is missing, like I just can't find it. Like, hey, has anyone seen my leg lately? I'm looking for it here and I just can't. I don't know. Maybe he lost his leg. Maybe, I don't know. But it goes on. So the officer asked Cox to describe. So that is, the man is Shannon Cox. So the subject, the suspect is Shannon Cox. He's a 48-year-old male. So the officer asked Cox, what caused the gruesome injury? So he's missing a portion of his leg, which would be quite gruesome. So he's bleeding out. And he says succinctly, a chop saw. Okay. So they notice that there's blood splatter. Well, that's pretty consistent with it being a chop saw. And it leads to the chop saw. And there was blood on the saw. There was more blood splatter on the wall. And so outside, there's a vehicle. And I thought this was kind of interesting too, because when you read the headline and everything, all you're seeing is this craziness that I'm about to tell you about the whole leg incident. But there is also a vehicle with the hood up, and a 20-pound propane cylinder was laying on top of the battery. Ashes were reportedly located in the vehicle, and the rear passenger window was broken. So this is one heck of a scene. And for you who aren't in law enforcement, I want you to take a moment and just think about this call coming in and you going to it, right? So, 911, yes, what's your emergency? And you get dispatched and it pops up on your computer and you start reading this call. And I don't know exactly what the dispatch said on this, but I'm sure it was something like, oh my goodness, he's bleeding out. So they're flying over there to this residence and they show up and this is what you see, right? You step out of your vehicle and you see a guy on the ground bleeding. Need to take care of that pretty quick. What happened to you? Chop saw. Okay. Your leg? Really? So you're dealing with that. You're seeing this trail of blood and you're noticing this vehicle with a propane cylinder from a grill sitting up on top of the battery, ashes inside it, and a broken window. So that's the scene. The very next line of this story, and a child was also present during the incident. Wow. So Cox's daughter tells the investigators that she was present when her dad cut his own leg off. And ironically, or maybe not so ironically, this says that the Child's Advocacy Center thought the child was still in some state of shock. I think she's going to be in some state of shock for like the rest of her life with some issues. But they then interview his wife. And his wife says that he's been acting odd all day long, but he was only verbally abusive. So he was telling Sandy, which was his wife, that he was Jesus Christ and she needed to get right with the Lord. Then he became violent towards her and said he was Satan. I would say he was half right. I mean, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure here, but I would say he got it probably half right in this case. So in one time he's Jesus Christ, and then the next minute he's Satan. And then he told her he was going to twist her head off and continue to make verbal threats. So this incident happens earlier in the day, right? Where he says he's Jesus Christ and he's Satan. And by the way, I'm going to twist your head off. So they have a child. So for all the parents out there, I don't 100% sure know what you would think the most prudent thing to do next would be. But what I don't think you would do if you were the wife or the husband, if it was reversed, would be leave the child at the residence while you leave to go somewhere else for your own safety. But that's what happened. So Sandy tells investigators that she left the home the night before the bizarre amputation and stayed overnight at a friend's house because she feared that her husband would murder her. But she wasn't worried about her daughter. No, she's good. I don't know what y'all are worried about. So Sandy and Shannon Cox were, thank goodness, both charged with a felony count of first degree endangering the welfare of a minor. And surprise, surprise, Mr. Cox has been told, stay away from both of them for the love of God. But that is this week's crazy story. All right, so in this final section, it's the one important takeaway for the week. This is just something for you to think about. You may have seen a pattern this week of two things that law enforcement regularly deals with. First was mental health. That was the first and the last story that we went over. Clearly the last story. And then accountability, which I would say would be the second and third stories that we went over. For this week, the one important takeaway, what I want to talk about is accountability. But rather than talk about the system's obvious failures to hold people accountable, I'd rather apply it to the idea of personal accountability. We see every day in the media the issues that can be caused by a lack of taking personal responsibility and holding oneself accountable. However, when people cannot and will not hold themselves accountable, which we've seen a lot lately, and their actions adversely affect others, then in a civil society, government does have to fill this void. Law enforcement has a key role in this, as many of us know. But when it comes to accountability, though it's not always in the area of law and order that it needs to apply, right? Sometimes, and more applicable to you, the listener, and to me, we must learn to hold ourselves accountable in various areas within our own lives in order to grow, right? In order to get better. And this can be a struggle. At least I know for me, it can be a struggle. And if it is for me, then I can assume it probably is for you as well. If you're anything like me, you face the same struggles, the same addictions, the same demons that prevent us from knowing what we should do in our lives sometimes. And whether we're talking health and fitness, whether we're talking nutrition, goal setting, not retreating from difficult conversations, not checking out maybe in our personal lives at home, or a whole host of other struggles, we often fail to hold ourselves accountable. How do I know? Well, because it's often a default for me. I so often feel like the biblical Apostle Paul, where he said, for what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do. How familiar does that feel? I want to go work out tonight, so instead, let's order a pizza. I mean, what the heck is that? But we all do it. Whatever is your vice, your addiction, your weakness, we find ourselves not doing what we should do, and then by contrast, do the very behavior, typically a self-sabotaging behavior, that we don't really want to be doing. But I don't just want to leave you with this self-realization. I want to offer you a few steps that we all can take in these situations. First, we have to turn to mentors. So what is a mentor in this context? Well, I would say it's someone who's just a little bit further down the path. It doesn't have to be the person who allegedly has it all figured out, especially since in reality, you will find that person does not exist. And you're not going to find someone who, quote unquote, has it all figured out. If my goal is to lose weight, which I hate to say is back again on the top of my list due to some health struggles, then the mentor I need has to be someone who has found ways to be consistent in their health goals. But I don't need someone who's been perfect in their health goals. Another tool, which can be the same person or maybe a different person entirely, is someone in the role of an accountability partner, right? I was just having this conversation with a good friend this week, and it doesn't have to be some sort of formal, stuffy type relationship. It's not like you need to post it on some job board. Needed one stern accountability partner, please. No, this can be a good friend, a family member, a coworker. It is someone with you on the journey who is willing to be there to help hold you accountable. You know, the whole, hey, Wayne, you said you wanted to write 5 pages a day to get that book done by the end of the year. How's that coming along? Is there anything I can do to help you reach that goal? Oh, writer's block. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's have a cup of coffee and then we can discuss this, right? That's a friend. That's someone who's going to hold you accountable to your dreams, your goals, your stated aspirations, the things that you are trying to accomplish. The last one I want to leave you with today may seem counterintuitive, but also we have to learn to be kind to ourselves. You have to make time for self-care, and you can't beat yourself up, something I'm very guilty of, when you feel like you're not meeting the mark. This is probably by far one of my biggest struggles and areas that I have to improve in. I can very easily be my hardest, most unforgiving critic, and if I can, I'm sure you can as well. If we don't take care of ourselves, we get into the self-loathing cycle. So often it leads to the very behaviors we are trying to avoid, especially for those who struggle with addictive type behaviors. Attacking yourself leads to more of the comforting actions and behaviors that you were most likely trying to avoid in the first place. So I want to leave it there for this week. The bottom line is to be forgiving to ourselves while also holding ourselves accountable to a higher standard. Achieving this through our relationships of being around people that will help keep us accountable. Since the very beginning of On the Blue Line, if you go back to the early episodes in 2019, you're going to hear me talking about this importance of community and being around like-minded people on the journey. If you're unsure where to start or feel like the right people are just not in your life right now, then I hope you'll consider the On the Blue Line community group that's designed for just this purpose. Bringing together like-minded people who are looking to excel at life. It is a little early before the official launch, but if this is something that would interest you, drop me an email. I mentioned the email address earlier, but it's admin@ontheblueline.com, or you can send it to feedback@ontheblueline.com, or you can always send me a DM and I will get in touch with you and we can discuss it further. What is most important to me is that you find someone or a group of someones who can be there for you. People that can help hold you accountable and can help you along the path. Everyone have a wonderful week. All right, everyone, let's talk about a couple reviews here. This one coming to us from Jacob Barton on YouTube. Good evening here, Binghamton, New York, western part of New York. I have subscribed to your channel. Thank you, Jacob. And in case you're like, well, how do you know he subscribed? He also reached out on Twitter and confirmed that he had watched the video that I had just sent out in a tweet. So thank you, Jacob. Thank you for watching the video. Thank you for replying. I greatly appreciate it. And to everyone else, this is a huge help. So please, I would love to get your feedback on whatever platform you are watching this on. If you would like it, if you would share it, and if you would leave a review, I would greatly appreciate it, and I will certainly mention it in a future episode. So that does it for this week's Morning Roll Call. I will see you Thursday in the interview room, but in the meantime, I'll see you on the Blue Line.